Stop scrolling. Look at your screen right now. I'm about to show you 4 methods, not weapons of violence. 4 strategic approaches to ruthlessness that Machiavelli observed in Renaissance Italy, where mercy meant weakness, and the difference between survival and destruction was how efficiently you eliminated threats. Each method represents a different form of ruthlessness, a different elimination philosophy, a different approach to removing obstacles that stand between you and your objectives. Method 1. The executioner's axe. Method 2. The surgeon's scalpel. Method 3. The poisoner's vial. Method 4. The time's erosion. Choose one method. Right now. Don't pick what sounds most moral or least violent. Your instinct is revealing your natural ruthlessness philosophy, how you remove threats, how you eliminate competition, how you deal with people who stand in your way. Comment your choice. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Do it before I reveal what it means, because what I'm about to decode will expose whether you're strategically ruthless or just cruel without purpose. I'll also discuss how each method contradicts the others, and you'll be surprised later in the video which form of ruthlessness actually creates more enemies than it eliminates. Before I reveal to you what the methods mean, let me take you to Imola, December 1502. Ramiro de Orco was Cesare Borgia's governor of Romagna, the man Borgia had appointed to pacify the region through terror and cruelty. For 2 years, Ramiro had done exactly that. He'd hanged rebels publicly. He'd tortured conspirators. He'd confiscated property. He ruled through fear so absolute that the entire Romagna had submitted to Borgia's authority. Ramiro had been perfect at his job. The region was pacified. Order was established. Borgia's control was complete. And on December 22, 1502, Borgia had Ramiro executed, cut in 2 pieces, displayed in the piazza of Cesana with a block of wood and a bloody knife beside his corpse. Why? Because Ramiro had served his purpose. Romagna was pacified, but the population hated Ramiro for his cruelty, and that hatred was beginning to transfer to Borgia himself. So Borgia eliminated the source of hatred, Ramiro, and made it look like justice for the population. Executioner's axe ruthlessness. Immediate, public, decisive. The threat was Ramiro becoming a liability. The solution was visible elimination that served multiple purposes simultaneously. Meanwhile, across Italy, Pope Alexander VI, Borgia's father, was using a completely different method. Alexander faced threats from the Orsini family, who wanted to limit papal power and maintain their own independence in Rome. But Alexander couldn't just execute them. They were too powerful, too connected, too embedded in Roman politics. So Alexander used the poisoner's vial. He weakened them gradually. He appointed their enemies to key positions. He withdrew favors slowly. He let their financial problems accumulate. He made their lives progressively more difficult without ever striking a visible blow. Over years, the Orsini declined. Not through open conflict, through invisible erosion. And when Borgia finally moved against them in 1502, they were too weak to resist effectively. 2 members of the same family, 2 different methods, both effective for their specific situations. But Machiavelli also watched rulers use the wrong method and create disasters. Piero de' Medici faced threats when he returned to Florence in 1512. Republican conspirators were plotting against him. His solution? Time's erosion. He tried to gradually undermine them through political maneuvering, hoping they would give up or lose support naturally. They didn't wait. They struck first. Piero was expelled again within 2 years, because he was too patient with threats that required immediate elimination. Wrong method, right threat, fatal outcome. Machiavelli realized that most people aren't too ruthless or not ruthless enough. They're ruthless with the wrong method for their specific situation. You chose your method at the start of this video. That choice revealed which elimination philosophy you instinctively reach for when facing threats. Now let me decode what each method represents, and which one actually removes obstacles efficiently versus which ones create more problems than they solve. We'll analyze each method, each ruthlessness method, each elimination philosophy, each fatal mistake. Because understanding all four methods means you can identify which approach you're using and whether it matches the threat you're facing or whether you're applying the wrong ruthlessness to your situation. Let's begin. Method 1. The executioner's axe. If you chose the executioner's axe, you eliminate threats through immediate, public, decisive force. You believe, when something needs to be removed, remove it now, visibly, completely. Let everyone see the elimination so they understand the consequences of becoming threats themselves. This isn't cruelty. It's one of 4 valid ruthlessness methods. Your elimination philosophy is swift and visible. When threats appear, you strike immediately. When obstacles emerge, you destroy them publicly. When competition arises, you crush it decisively before it grows stronger. This is the ruthlessness of military commanders, corporate raiders, and anyone who believes the best elimination is the one that happens fast enough to prevent retaliation and visible enough to deter future threats. Machiavelli wrote about the executioner's axe in Chapter 8 of The Prince, analyzing Agathocles of Syracuse. Yet it cannot be called talent to slay fellow citizens, to deceive friends, to be without faith, without mercy, without religion. Such methods may gain empire, but not glory. But then, critically, still, if the courage of Agathocles in entering into and extricating himself from dangers be considered, together with his greatness of mind in enduring and overcoming hardships, it cannot be seen why he should be esteemed less than the most notable captain. Translation. The executioner's axe works when elimination needs to be immediate and complete, even if it lacks elegance. Cesare Borgia's execution of Ramiro de Orco exemplified the executioner's axe at its finest. Ramiro had become a liability. The population hated him. That hatred was beginning to damage Borgia's legitimacy. Borgia could have quietly removed Ramiro, transferred him to another position, sent him away, let him fade into obscurity. But that wouldn't have solved the problem. The population would still associate Borgia with Ramiro's cruelty. The hatred would remain, so Borgia used the axe. Public execution, brutal display, clear message. The population celebrated Ramiro's death. They saw Borgia as their liberator from the tyrant. The hatred that had been building toward Borgia was redirected entirely onto Ramiro and eliminated along with him. Executioner's axe at its peak. Fast elimination that solves multiple problems simultaneously through visible, decisive force. In modern terms, you're the executive who fires problematic employees immediately and publicly. The competitor who crushes rivals decisively before they can regroup. The leader who eliminates threats the moment they appear, making the elimination visible to deter others. You maintain control through swift, visible ruthlessness. As long as you can eliminate threats faster than they can organize, you survive. Your strength is speed and deterrence. Executioner's axe users prevent most threats from ever emerging because potential threats see what happens to actual threats and choose not to become targets. But here's the fatal flaw Machiavelli identified in the executioner's axe. Visible elimination creates visible enemies. Every public execution generates sympathy for the eliminated and fear among survivors, both of which can unite against you. Cesare Borgia's execution of Ramiro worked because Ramiro had no sympathizers. The population wanted him dead. Borgia's visible ruthlessness aligned with popular desire. But when Borgia tried to use the axe against the conspirators at Senigallia, he made a critical mistake. He executed Vitellozzo and Oliverotto immediately, but he kept the Orsini brothers alive temporarily because he was negotiating with their family. That delay was fatal. The Orsini family saw their relatives imprisoned and realized Borgia intended to eliminate them all. They united every enemy Borgia had made through his visible eliminations. And when Pope Alexander VI died in 1503, that coalition destroyed Borgia completely. Executioner's axe without complete elimination equals creating organized enemies. Francesco Sforza made the same mistake when he conquered Milan in 1450. He used the axe to eliminate some noble families publicly, but left others alive because he thought showing some mercy would make him appear just. Instead, the surviving families saw the executions, realized they might be next, and conspired together. Within his lifetime, Sforza faced 3 major conspiracies, all organized by survivors of his incomplete eliminations. If you are an executioner's axe user, your survival depends on complete elimination or no elimination. Don't use visible ruthlessness halfway. Either eliminate the threat entirely, including everyone who might seek revenge, or use a different method that doesn't create visible enemies. The most dangerous executioner's axe strategists are the ones who strike with overwhelming force that eliminates not just the threat, but everyone connected to it, so that no one remains to organize retaliation. Machiavelli's advice for swift eliminators appears in Chapter 8. Hence, it is to be remarked that, in seizing a state, the usurper ought to examine closely into all those injuries which it is necessary for him to inflict, and to do them all at one stroke so as not to have to repeat them daily. Translation: if you're going to use the axe, use it once and completely. Don't wound repeatedly. Execute once and eliminate all related threats simultaneously. Executioner's axe with complete execution. That's survival. If you chose method 1, if you instinctively gravitated toward believing ruthlessness means immediate, visible, decisive elimination, then comment below. I eliminate with the executioner's axe. Claim your method. Because understanding that you use swift, visible elimination means you can ensure your strikes are complete. Before incomplete elimination creates organized enemies who unite against you. Method 2. The surgeon's scalpel. If you chose the surgeon's scalpel, you eliminate threats through precise, calculated surgical removal. You believe, when something needs to be removed, remove it precisely. Not everything connected to it. Not more than necessary. Just the exact threat, extracted with minimal collateral damage. This isn't weakness. It's one of 4 valid ruthlessness methods. Your elimination philosophy is precision and calculation. When threats appear, you analyze them carefully. When obstacles emerge, you identify exactly what needs to be removed. When competition arises, you eliminate only what's necessary, preserving everything else. This is the ruthlessness of strategists, chess players, and anyone who believes the best elimination is the one that removes the threat without creating unnecessary enemies or destroying useful resources. Machiavelli wrote about the surgeon's scalpel in Chapter 7 of The Prince, analyzing Cesare Borgia's consolidation of the Romagna. The Duke, therefore, having acquired the Romagna and beaten the Colonnesi, while wishing to hold that which he had got and to advance further, had two hindrances. The one, his forces did not appear loyal to him. The other, the goodwill of France. Translation: the Scalpel recognizes that elimination must be precise enough to remove threats without destroying the systems you need to maintain power. Cesare Borgia's trap at Senigallia exemplified the surgeon's scalpel at its finest. Borgia faced a conspiracy involving multiple commanders. The executioner's axe approach would have been to arrest them all immediately when he discovered the plot. Fast, visible, decisive. But that would have scattered the conspiracy. Some conspirators would have escaped. They would have regrouped. The threat would have multiplied. The poisoner's Vial approach would have been to eliminate them slowly over months. Invisible, deniable, safe. But that would have given them time to strike first. Conspirators who sense danger accelerate their plans. So Borgia used the Scalpel. He appeared weak and conciliatory, drawing all the conspirators into one location simultaneously. Then he eliminated all of them in one night through precise surgical removal. Perfect calculation, zero collateral damage, complete threat elimination with minimal additional enemies created. The population of Senigallia wasn't terrorized. The conspirators' soldiers weren't massacred. The political system wasn't disrupted. Just the specific threats, removed surgically. In modern terms, you're the executive who fires only the specific employees causing problems, preserving teams and systems. The competitor who eliminates only the rival's key advantage, not the entire company. The leader who removes obstacles precisely without destroying everything around them. You maintain control through calculated precision. As long as you can identify and remove exact threats without collateral damage, you minimize the enemies your ruthlessness creates. Your strength is efficient elimination. Surgeon Scalpel users create fewer enemies because they only eliminate what's necessary, leaving survivors with less reason to seek revenge. But here's the fatal flaw Machiavelli identified in the surgeon's scalpel. Precision requires perfect information. If you misidentify the threat or misconnected threats, surgical removal fails catastrophically. Cesare Borgia's scalpel strategy at Senigallia worked perfectly because his intelligence was accurate. He knew every conspirator. He understood their connections. He calculated their response to apparent weakness. But when Pope Alexander VI died in August 1503, Borgia's scalpel approach failed completely. He'd been precisely eliminating specific enemies one by one, but he hadn't eliminated the structural vulnerability that his entire power depended on his father remaining pope. He'd removed individual threats surgically, but he'd missed the systemic threat. And when that systemic threat materialized, all his precise eliminations meant nothing. Within months, Borgia lost everything. Not because his scalpel technique was flawed, but because he'd applied surgical precision to individual enemies while missing the foundational threat. Precision without systemic awareness equals failure. Pope Julius II made a similar mistake when dealing with Venice in 1509. He used the scalpel approach, forming the League of Cambrai to surgically remove Venice's mainland territories while preserving Venice as a maritime power. Perfect precision. Venice was weakened exactly as intended without being destroyed entirely. But Julius miscalculated the systemic threat. Once Venice was weakened, France became dominant in northern Italy, a far greater threat than Venice had ever been. Julius had surgically removed one threat and accidentally created a larger one. His precision was perfect. His strategic analysis was incomplete. If you are a surgeon's scalpel user, your survival depends on systemic analysis before surgical execution. Don't just identify individual threats precisely. Map the system those threats exist within. Understand what happens when you remove specific pieces. Calculate second and third order effects. The most dangerous surgeon's scalpel strategists are the ones who combine surgical precision with systemic awareness, so they remove threats without accidentally creating larger problems. Machiavelli's advice for precise eliminators appears in Chapter 7. Hence, he who considers it necessary to secure himself in his new principality, to win friends, to overcome either by force or fraud, to make himself beloved and feared by the people, to be followed and revered by the soldiers, ought to take them as examples. Translation: Precision is excellent, but precision without understanding the complete system equals precise failure. Surgeon's scalpel with systemic awareness. That's survival. If you chose Method 2, if you instinctively gravitated toward believing ruthlessness means precise, calculated, surgical elimination of exact threats, then comment below, "I eliminate with the surgeon's scalpel." Claim your method. Because understanding that you use surgical precision means you can develop systemic awareness. Before your precise eliminations create systemic problems you didn't calculate. Method 3. The poisoner's vial. If you chose the poisoner's vial, you eliminate threats through invisible, deniable, gradual elimination. You believe, when something needs to be removed, remove it invisibly. Let it appear natural. Let others think the threat destroyed itself. Maintain deniability while achieving elimination. This isn't cowardice. It's one of 4 valid ruthlessness methods. Your elimination philosophy is patience and invisibility. When threats appear, you undermine them slowly. When obstacles emerge, you weaken them gradually. When competition arises, you sabotage it subtly, so that when elimination finally occurs, no one suspects you caused it. This is the ruthlessness of spy masters, political operatives, and anyone who believes the best elimination is the one that leaves you blameless while the threat disappears. Machiavelli wrote about the poisoner's vial in Chapter 8, though he expressed moral ambivalence. Some may wonder how it can happen that Agathocles and his like, after infinite treacheries and cruelties, should live secure in his country and defend himself from external enemies and never be conspired against by his own citizens. Translation: The vial works when elimination happens so gradually and invisibly that no one organizes against you because they don't realize you're the cause. Pope Alexander VI exemplified the poisoner's vial at its highest level. Alexander faced constant threats from powerful Roman families: the Orsini, the Colonna, the Savelli. All of them wanted to limit papal power and maintain their own independence. Alexander couldn't use the executioner's axe. They were too powerful, too connected, too embedded in Roman society. Public elimination would have united all of them against him. He couldn't use the surgeon's scalpel. They were distributed across Rome. Precise surgical removal of specific leaders would alert the others and accelerate their resistance. So Alexander used the vial. Over years, he slowly poisoned their political power. He appointed their enemies to key positions, gradually, over time, so no single appointment seemed threatening. He withdrew papal favors slowly, never dramatically, just steadily reducing their access to revenue and influence. He supported their rivals financially, subtly through intermediaries, so they couldn't prove papal involvement. He let their internal conflicts fester, never overtly encouraging them, just failing to mediate when they asked for papal intervention. By 1502, the Orsini family was weak enough that when Cesare Borgia moved against them militarily, they couldn't resist effectively. Not because of Borgia's military genius, because Alexander had spent years invisibly undermining their power. Poisoner's Vial at its peak. Gradual, invisible elimination that appears natural rather than hostile. In modern terms, you're the executive who slowly removes problematic employees through restructuring rather than firing. The competitor who gradually undermines rivals' market position rather than attacking directly. The leader who lets enemies destroy themselves through their own mistakes. Mistakes you quietly encourage. You maintain control through invisible ruthlessness. As long as you can eliminate threats without being identified as the eliminator, you avoid creating organized enemies. Your strength is deniability. Poisoner's Vial users survive because no one can prove they're responsible for eliminations, so no one can organize revenge against them specifically. But here's the fatal flaw Machiavelli identified in the Poisoner's Vial. Gradual elimination gives threats time to strike first. While you're slowly poisoning their power, they might suddenly attack while they still have strength. Pope Alexander VI's Vial strategy worked for his entire papacy because he died before his enemies realized he'd been the source of their decline. But his son Cesare Borgia inherited a half-completed Vial strategy when Alexander died in 1503. The Orsini family was weakened, but not eliminated. The Colonna family was declining, but still dangerous. And because the poisoning was incomplete, those families still had enough strength to unite against Borgia the moment Alexander's protection disappeared. Within months, Borgia lost everything. Not because the Vial strategy was wrong, but because it hadn't finished working before circumstances changed. Gradual elimination without guaranteed completion time equals giving enemies opportunity to strike. Caterina Sforza made the same mistake when dealing with Cesare Borgia's advance in 1499. She tried to use the Vial, slowly undermining his supply lines, gradually poisoning his relationships with other Italian states, invisibly encouraging opposition. But Borgia moved faster than her poison could work. He attacked while she was still in the middle of gradual elimination. And because her Vial strategy wasn't complete, she had no defense when he struck. If you are a Poisoner's Vial user, your survival depends on ensuring you have time to complete the elimination. Don't start gradual invisible elimination unless you can guarantee the time needed to finish. And maintain backup defenses in case targets strike before the poison finishes working. The most dangerous Poisoner's Vial strategists are the ones who combine invisible elimination with visible defenses. So they're protected while the gradual poisoning completes. Machiavelli's advice for invisible eliminators appears in Chapter 18. Therefore, it is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. Translation: invisibility is powerful, but invisibility without the ability to defend visibly when discovered equals vulnerability. Poisoner's Vial with defensive backup. That's survival. If you chose Method 3, if you instinctively gravitated toward believing ruthlessness means invisible, deniable, gradual elimination, then comment below. I eliminate with the Poisoner's Vial. Claim your method. Because understanding that you use invisible elimination means you can ensure you have time to complete it, before threats strike while your poison is still working. Method 4. Times Erosion. If you chose Times Erosion, you eliminate threats through patience, undermining, and letting obstacles destroy themselves. You believe, when something needs to be removed, wait. Undermine its foundation. Let time and circumstances do the work. Most threats destroy themselves if you position correctly and remain patient. This isn't passivity. It's one of 4 valid ruthlessness methods. Your elimination philosophy is strategic patience. When threats appear, you don't strike. you position. When obstacles emerge, you don't remove them. You wait for them to collapse. When competition arises, you don't fight. You let their own mistakes destroy them while you remain stable. This is the ruthlessness of long-term strategists, patient investors, and anyone who believes the best elimination is the one that happens naturally without your visible involvement. Machiavelli wrote about time's erosion in Chapter 3, analyzing Roman expansion. The Romans did in these instances what all prudent princes ought to do, who have to regard not only present troubles, but also future ones, for which they must prepare with every energy. Translation: Erosion works when you position correctly and let time remove threats that immediate action would only strengthen. Cosimo de' Medici exemplified time's erosion at its finest. In 1433, the Albizzi family put Cosimo on trial for tyranny and sentenced him to exile. The Albizzi controlled Florence. They had political authority. They had popular support. They had everything except Medici banking infrastructure. The executioner's axe approach would have been to organize immediate military resistance. Fast, visible, decisive. But that would have failed. The Albizzi had superior force in 1433. The surgeon's scalpel approach would have been to eliminate specific Albizzi leaders through targeted action. Precise, calculated, surgical. But that would have created martyrs and united the rest of the family. The poisoner's Vial approach would have been to slowly undermine Albizzi authority through invisible sabotage. Gradual, deniable, patient. But that might have taken years, during which Cosimo would remain in exile without guarantee of success. So Cosimo used time's erosion. He went into exile peacefully. He maintained his banking operations from outside Florence. And he waited. Within 1 year, Florence's economy began struggling without Medici financial infrastructure. The Albizzi government couldn't raise revenue effectively. They couldn't finance military operations. They couldn't maintain the civic projects that kept the population satisfied. Cosimo didn't sabotage them. He didn't attack them. He didn't even criticize them publicly. He just waited while the natural consequences of their decision to exile him eroded their authority. By 1434, the Signoria that had exiled Cosimo begged him to return. Not because he'd fought them, because they'd destroyed themselves by removing the financial foundation their power depended on. Time's erosion at its peak. Strategic positioning plus patience equals enemies destroying themselves. In modern terms, you're the executive who lets bad managers fail naturally rather than fighting them. The competitor who positions correctly and waits for rivals to make strategic mistakes. The leader who understands that most threats eliminate themselves if you avoid helping them succeed. You maintain control through strategic patience. As long as you can position correctly and outlast threats, they destroy themselves without you having to eliminate them visibly. Your strength is zero-cost elimination. Time's erosion users spend nothing on direct elimination. They just position correctly and wait for natural consequences to remove threats. But here's the fatal flaw Machiavelli identified in time's erosion. Patience assumes threats will wait patiently while eroding. Desperate enemies accelerate, and while you're waiting for erosion, they might eliminate you first. Cosimo de' Medici's erosion strategy in 1433 worked because the Albizzi were arrogant. They believed they'd won permanently. They didn't accelerate their consolidation of power while Cosimo was weak. But when Lorenzo de' Medici tried to use time's erosion against Girolamo Savonarola in 1494, it failed catastrophically. Lorenzo was dying. Savonarola was rising. Lorenzo could have used the axe, immediate elimination of the troublesome friar, or the scalpel, precise removal through papal pressure. Or the Vial, gradual undermining of Savonarola's credibility. Instead, Lorenzo used erosion. He assumed Savonarola would lose popular support naturally. He positioned his family to outlast the friar's influence. He waited for time to erode Savonarola's authority. But Savonarola didn't wait. The moment Lorenzo died, Savonarola accelerated. He seized political control of Florence. He expelled the Medici. He destroyed their power in weeks, while Lorenzo's son Piero was still waiting patiently for erosion to work. Time's erosion without defensive action against accelerating threats equals elimination while you're waiting. Piero Soderini made the same mistake in 1512. He used erosion strategy against the returning Medici, positioning Florence to outlast them, waiting for their Spanish military support to leave, assuming time would erode their invasion. But the Medici didn't wait for erosion. They attacked immediately. And because Soderini had no defensive backup to his erosion strategy, Florence fell within weeks. If you are a time's erosion user, your survival depends on recognizing when threats won't wait patiently. Don't rely on erosion alone. Maintain defensive capabilities. And when threats accelerate rather than waiting passively, switch to faster methods before they eliminate you while you're still waiting. The most dangerous time's erosion strategists are the ones who combine patient positioning with the ability to strike rapidly when patience becomes dangerous. Machiavelli's advice for patient eliminators appears in Chapter 3. For it may be said of men in general that they are ungrateful, voluble, dissemblers, anxious to avoid danger, and covetous of gain. Translation: Erosion works on stable systems, but men are not stable. When they sense danger, they accelerate. Your patience must include plans for when they stop being patient. Time's erosion with acceleration awareness. That's survival. If you chose Method 4, if you instinctively gravitated toward believing ruthlessness means patient positioning and letting threats destroy themselves naturally, then comment below, I eliminate with time's erosion. Claim your method. Because understanding that you use patient erosion means you can recognize accelerating threats before they eliminate you while you're waiting for natural consequences. The ruthlessness reality. You now know your Machiavellian elimination philosophy. The executioner's axe, the surgeon's scalpel, the poisoner's vial, time's erosion. But here's what Machiavelli understood that separates strategic ruthlessness from pointless cruelty. Every method works for specific threats. Every elimination method has situations where it's perfect, and situations where it creates more problems than it solves. The executioner's axe works when threats need immediate visible elimination, and you can ensure complete removal, including everyone who might seek revenge. The surgeon's scalpel works when you have perfect information about exact threats and can remove them without systemic consequences you haven't calculated. The poisoner's vial works when you have guaranteed time to complete gradual elimination and threats won't accelerate before the poison finishes working. Time's erosion works when you can position correctly to outlast threats and they won't accelerate their plans when they sense danger. Wrong method for your specific threat? You create more enemies than you eliminate. Machiavelli watched every method fail when misapplied. Executioner's axe. Francesco Sforza eliminated some enemies publicly, but left related families alive. Those survivors organized the conspiracies that plagued his reign. Incomplete visible elimination creates organized enemies. Surgeon's scalpel. Pope Julius II precisely eliminated Venice's mainland power, but miscalculated that this would make France dominant. Surgical precision without systemic awareness creates larger threats. Poisoner's vial. Caterina Sforza tried invisible, gradual elimination of Cesare Borgia, but he attacked before her poison could work. Gradual elimination without guaranteed completion time gives threats opportunity to strike first. Time's erosion. Piero Soderini waited for returning Medici to erode naturally, but they attacked immediately. Patient positioning without defensive backup equals elimination while you're waiting. Understanding your instinctive method is step 1. Understanding which method matches which threat is step 2. Switching methods based on threat type is survival. If you eliminate with the executioner's axe, your strength is swift, visible elimination that deters future threats. Your weakness is incomplete elimination, creating organized enemies. Your upgrade. Ensure elimination is complete, including everyone who might seek revenge, or don't use visible elimination at all. If you eliminate with the surgeon's scalpel, your strength is precise removal without unnecessary collateral damage. Your weakness is missing systemic threats while focusing on individual precision. Your upgrade, map the complete system before surgical removal. Calculate second and third order effects. If you eliminate with the poisoner's vial, your strength is invisible, deniable elimination that avoids creating identified enemies. Your weakness is giving threats time to strike before gradual elimination completes. Your upgrade. Ensure guaranteed completion time. Maintain defensive backup while poison works. If you eliminate with time's erosion, your strength is zero-cost elimination through patient strategic positioning. Your weakness is threats accelerating before erosion works. Your upgrade. Recognize when threats won't wait. Switch to faster methods when patience becomes dangerous. But here's the secret. Machiavelli never wrote explicitly. The most strategically ruthless people use all 4 methods situationally. Executioner's axe for immediate threats that need visible deterrence. Surgeon's scalpel for precise threats where you have perfect information. Poisoner's vial for powerful enemies you can't eliminate openly. Time's erosion for self-destructing threats where patience costs nothing. 4 methods. 4 threat types. 1 complete elimination system. Cesare Borgia did this perfectly in 1502 to 1503. He used time's erosion on the Orsini family, letting his father's gradual poisoning weaken them. He used surgeon's scalpel on the conspirators at Senigallia, precise simultaneous elimination. He used executioner's axe on Ramiro de Orco, immediate public elimination for multiple purposes. He used poisoner's vial on various minor enemies, invisible, gradual undermining. 4 methods. Applied situationally. Perfect strategic ruthlessness. Until his father died and removed the foundation, all 4 strategies depended on. But that wasn't a method failure. That was a systemic vulnerability. His elimination methods were perfect. His strategic foundation wasn't. That's the difference between people who are cruel without purpose versus people who are strategically ruthless and actually eliminate obstacles efficiently. Method. Situational method. Not just using one method reflexively, but choosing the method that matches the specific threat you're facing. The final challenge. Comment your method one more time. I eliminate with the executioner's axe. I eliminate with the surgeon's scalpel. I eliminate with the poisoner's vial. I eliminate with time's erosion. Claim your method. Because this isn't a personality quiz. This is a ruthlessness philosophy diagnostic. Machiavelli watched rulers eliminate threats throughout Renaissance Italy. He documented which elimination methods actually removed obstacles versus which methods created more enemies than they eliminated. I'm decoding his method system to show you which elimination philosophy you instinctively use. and whether it matches the threats you're actually facing, or whether you're applying the wrong ruthlessness to your situation. Like and subscribe to this channel. Because in the next video, I'm revealing the situational method system Machiavelli identified. How to recognize which threats require which methods. The diagnostic framework that tells you when to use swift, visible elimination versus precise surgical removal versus invisible, gradual poisoning versus patient, strategic erosion. The complete ruthlessness system that lets you eliminate obstacles efficiently without creating unnecessary enemies or wasting resources on the wrong elimination method. Machiavelli didn't just study ruthlessness. He mapped the exact relationship between threat types and elimination methods. So you match the method to the obstacle rather than using one method reflexively regardless of situation. And in the next video, I'll show you how to become situationally ruthless instead of just instinctively cruel. Until then, study your natural method. Identify which threats you're facing. And remember, in the game of power, strategic ruthlessness isn't about being cruel. It's about choosing the elimination method that removes the obstacle efficiently without creating worse problems. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But it is best to eliminate threats with the right method for each situation, because efficient elimination creates fewer enemies than clumsy cruelty. Choose your method wisely. I'll see you in the next revelation.